Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. Pleasant Valley State Prison is a 640-acre minimum to maximum security prison located near Coalinga in Fresno County, California. The facility opened in November 1994. It has experienced several changes over the years. In the year 2000, Pleasant Valley State Prison activated 2 substance abuse programs. And as of July 2022, it was incarcerated approximately 2,700 inmates, employing over 1,600 staff. According to DJ Vodica, author and former corrections official, there were some Pleasant Valley staff who belonged to a loose-knit group called the Green Wall. This group also existed at several other CDC facilities, as discussed in previous videos. Vodica had prior experience as an investigative services unit officer and was offered a position in ISU at Pleasant Valley, but declined the offer by then Chief Deputy Warden Paul Ward. Vodica then was assigned to Deep Facility, which had a high number of Northern Structure inmates at the time. But word had reached the facility, including the captain in charge of Deep Facility, that Vodica had filed previous complaints against staff at Corcoran, Pelican Bay, and Salinas Valley State Prison, so he is immediately ostracized. He had been labeled a traitor. When he got into a very serious incident in Pleasant Valley with offenders, backup officers just stood there and stated they were waiting for a sergeant to arrive before they could offer him assistance. The California Correctional Peace Officers Association Union did not back him up either. He called bullshit on their sorry excuses and knew his career was over. He was considered damaged goods by too many staff, a snitch, a whistleblower. The letter went on to testify about these events and others before the California State Senate investigating corruption within the California Department of Corrections. I understand that B and C facility are mainline GP yards with many active gang members. In November 2002, the facility housed approximately 900 sensitive needs inmates at Deep Facility. Then in May 2004, they converted A facility to sensitive needs yards that housed about 1,000 inmates. Around that time period, sensitive needs yard gangs, also commonly referred to as dropout gangs, were blowing up in the California Department of Corrections. My good friends Chris Blatchford, now retired IGI officer Robert Clayton, explained.
This is Pleasant Valley State Prison in Central California, and what's called a Sensitive Needs Yard, or SNY for short. It's supposed to be a relatively safe place to do your time, but that's all changed. Northern Riders, who use the Playboy Bunny as their symbol, are a prison-based gang composed of dropouts who left other gangs, came to an SNY yard seeking protection, and then formed a new gang. And the SNYs have gone from a haven for safety to a den of predators, says Central California gang investigator Robert Clayton.
I've had inmates request to go back to the main line, the general population, because they were more afraid of these SNY gangs than they were of the gang they left prior. So we have guys that ask for protection all the time off of a protection yard.
As I mentioned in my last video, some Bulldogs were held at Pleasant Valley State Prison and were sent down to Ironwood a few years ago, where they were immediately attacked. The dogs also had a fairly large presence at Salinas Valley State Prison, which I will cover after I do a High Desert State Prison historical video. A lot of different strategies have been tried to get the dogs to comply with programs in CDC, but nothing has really worked. Reintegration efforts definitely have not worked. I understand that the Perros Chatos were sometimes taken off normal programs and given a modified split program that many of them considered to be punishment. In a modified program, you get more access to phones, yard, showers, etc. than in ADSEG, but only about a half or less than you get on most GP yards. There have been many violent incidents at the facility over the years. For instance, in 2009, inmate Marcus Falk was suspected of killing his cellmate, Jason Cannon. This case took about 15 years to be heard due to multiple legal delays.
Now to an Action News update. A Fresno County jury is hearing evidence about a murder back in 2009. Prosecutors charged Marcus Falk for killing his cellmate while the two were imprisoned at the Pleasant Valley State Prison in Coalinga. Action News reporter Gabe Ferris was in the courtroom today as jurors heard about the crime scene.
15 years after an inmate was murdered at the Pleasant Valley State Prison, a Fresno County jury is now learning where investigators say the suspect stashed his weapon.
Once this mattress was moved outside of the cell,
Prosecutors have charged Marcus Falk with 1 count of murder. Media reports from 2009 say Falk killed his cellmate, Jason Sean Cannon. The victim was 35 years old and from Sacramento County. He was serving a 32-month sentence for resisting arrest. On Thursday, jurors heard evidence about a prison-made weapon investigators found in Falk's cell, stuffed in a mattress.
As I recall, it was embedded in the stuffing.
It was embedded?
Yes,
okay.
in the center somehow.
Prosecutors say Falk had a pact with another prison inmate to kill their cellmates.
The jury in the Falk trial was unable to reach a verdict. Prosecutors could have refiled it, but I do not know the subsequent status of that case. In July 2009, there was a riot at the prison involving about 75 prisoners. That resulted in the death of one. I believe he was a bulldog and also had his leg blown off by the Mini 14. In August 2009, there was another riot at the facility involving almost 200 offenders on Sea Yard. That was the second major disturbance within 2 days at the facility. The second incident involved 3 inmates attacking a fourth. That then escalated into a 41-man riot at Facility B. Correctional officers quelled the riot with chemical agents and 2 warning shots from the Mini 14. 3 inmates were injured in that incident, and prison staff found 2 inmate-manufactured weapons near the scene. I believe that much of that drama was behind the Bulldogs beefing with Surenos, and active yards were on lockdown during much of 2008 through 2009. A lot of times what happens is an individual or group of individuals are attacked and the culprits and victims are removed, but it leaves behind friends or members of that group that will then retaliate against individuals or rivals who have been left on the yard. These kind of issues often lead to lockdowns, but administrators are also under pressure from inmate lawsuits, prison rights advocates, and families to take them off lockdowns. May 2010, Sacramento rapper X-Rated, born on Anna Brown Coalinga, who is affiliated with the Garden Block Crips out of Sacramento, who are based just a mile away from our home near there in the late 1980s through early 90s. In 1992, Brown was sentenced to 31 years in prison on murder charges, which he denied and maintained his innocence. Brown was said to have been hit 7 times.
This is home for Anna Ray Brown, doing 31 years for his part in a gangland killing.
I'm at the pinnacle, on top of my game.
He's also known as X-Rated, the street name he's used in the release of a dozen rap albums. In this video obtained by Fox 11 News, X-Rated, here in the black pants, is attacked by 2 knife-wielding inmates who want him dead. It sparks a small prison yard riot. He's slashed 7 times but survives. In this incident report, X-Rated tells investigators, "It was Northern Riders who stabbed me." In this case, these Northern Riders, all lifers, were allegedly extorting X-Rated to force him to produce a rap album of their own. Investigators say Northern Riders, who also use a falling star as their symbol, grew from 6 members to 800 in a decade, making it the fastest growing SNY gang. But Northern California investigator Mike Brody says, not the only one.
All over the state. There are dropout gangs for every ethnic group and every territorial group.
Brothers by choice, sucker-free, independent riders, cutthroat family, bad news banditos. Since the 1990s, the list has grown to more than 24 SNY gangs. Some have disappeared, but investigators say there are now SNY gangs at 22 of the state's 33 prisons. That's up from just 2 SNY yards that were first established in 1998. Gang investigator Billy Idroso worked the San Diego prison beat.
They're dangerous because what people don't realize is just because you're a dropout, it doesn't mean that you lost that mentality. You know, you still have that gangster mentality.
And here on these SNY yards, that means taxing, extortion, theft, drug dealing, assaults, and even murder.
It's just drama. That's all they are, is drama.
This inmate, who does not want to be identified, says he's been jumped a couple of times on SNY yards.
So wait for you to get your drugs out and come over and just take what you have. You're going to send money to my books, and if you don't, we're going to smash you.
Ironically, these SNY, or protective custody yards, are supposed to be safer than the main line.
I heard there were some new flowers housed with actives on Sea Yard. And if I have it correctly, the new flowers can get along with the Bulldogs. Please let me know if that is still true. In November 2018, 134 inmates began rioting early in the afternoon. I understand the Bulldogs were involved in that one too. That particular incident sent several inmates to the hospital, and many handmade weapons were found afterwards. January 5th, 2019, Pleasant Valley officials implemented another program where they had their Bulldogs and rivals programming on alternating days. A few weeks later, in February of that year, CDC officials ordered Pleasant Valley officials to end that program and, according to a lawsuit, conducted 2 gladiator fights within a week, which they claimed prison officials used the terms of these incidents as peace talks, or methods used to end violence, or integration incrementals, etc. The lawsuit mentioned that prison administrators conducted these fights by clearing out the exercise yard, then allowing a few members of opposing factions at the time, without restraints, onto the yard and allowed them to fight. The lawsuit stated that guards would then stand by and watch until the fighting began, then use pepper spray and shoot projectiles until the fighting ended. In one particular case, it was cited that a gladiator fight was conducted on February 14, 2019, which is Valentine's Day, between 2 Southern Hispanics and 2 Fresno Bulldogs, and I understand there was no love. In July 2019, there were 2 riots at Pleasant Valley, one that involved 182 inmates, where 3 inmates were wounded and treated outside hospitals for their puncture wounds. Guards also used pepper spray to break up that incident. And in October 2022, according to some sources, there was an approximately 100-man riot at Pleasant Valley. In 2012, one former Northern Soldado, Michael Avalos, refused to assist another Norteño to dispose of a vehicle that was evidence in a murder case. Word is, Michael's friend, Eric P. Jimenez, who they called Psycho, and his crimey Matthew Campos killed a drug dealer who was also having relations with Jimenez's girlfriend at the time. Jimenez pistol whipped the victim and held his hands, while Campos struck him with brass knuckles. Jimenez then called for his girlfriend, Raquel Espinosa, to grab an electrical cord that he used to strangle the victim. Jimenez and Campos stole drugs and cash from this victim, rolled his body up in a carpet, and tossed the body in the back of a truck. Campos was dropped off at his home before Jimenez burned the body at a mechanical shop in Porterville and tried to cover up his crime. But when Avalos did not assist, he was killed for it by supporters of Jimenez, specifically Joshua Stepp and Nathan Hunt, who were charged in that case. Jimenez was given the death penalty for his crimes, transferred to San Quentin's death row, but was transferred after the death penalty was revoked, and is currently housed at Pleasant Valley State Prison. In March 2023, Pleasant Valley officials found that 39-year-old Richard Derdering was unresponsive on Sea Yard. An inmate-manufactured weapon was recovered at the scene. Allegedly, the knife was left sticking out of his chest. Staff quickly initiated life-saving measures, but he was pronounced dead about a half hour later. Police say that 34-year-old Charles Godding was identified as the hitter and was rehoused in Ad Seg as his policy. Godding was sentenced in Alameda County in June 2021 to serve life without the possibility of parole for attempted first-degree murder of a peace officer with the enhancement of the discharge of a firearm, second-degree murder, and possession of a firearm by a felon. Allegedly, he was stopped at a BART police station when he ran out of gas, and I believe was in the process of refilling his gas tank when he was questioned by BART officers, since they found him to be acting suspicious near the station. Apparently, he had shot a good friend in the head and had the murder victim's body wrapped up in the back of his truck. Godding was twigging out on meth and realized his predicament when he took off. Being pursued by the officers, he shot at them. He was apprehended and charged in that case, as well as the murder of his friend. Hopefully the lesson there is, don't do meth, kids. You'll end up doing some whacked out stuff, eventually get busted, go to jail or prison, where you surely will be victimized or forced to do more terrible acts, and could end up dead or doing life in prison for all the few thrills of doing a little bit of meth. In November 2024, there was another death at the facility, involving 2 incarcerated people, Raul Godinez and Omar Delgado, who attacked inmate Alan Green. Staff responded and immediately ordered all individuals to get down. When those directions were ignored, staff used chemical weapons to successfully quell the incident. Life-saving measures were also performed on Green, who had suffered multiple puncture wounds, but he was pronounced dead approximately an hour and a half later. All of the individuals involved in this incident were said to be Surenos. As I've stated before in other videos, there are many norteños in Nuestra Familia who have been housed at Pleasant Valley over the years. David Joker Arzarate Valenzuela from Modesto was considered to be an NF leader while he was housed at Tehachapi SHU. He was then transferred to Pleasant Valley State Prison after the SHU kickouts and is presently housed at Old Folsom Prison. 3 individuals with ties to the Nuestra Familia, Jerry Huesos Chavez and Zaragoza Compon Sanchez of San Jose, as well as Julio Sleepy Cabrera of Watson, were housed at the prison September 15, 2019, when all 3 were hit simultaneously as part of a coordinated attack on the Matt Rocha car by 3 teams loyal to the state NF. Chavez was subsequently moved to San Quentin, and Sanchez was already in trouble with the federal NF, specifically Skip Villanueva, and moved to Abano. Cabrera, former NF shot caller BJ's brother, shows no longer in custody. As I stated in a previous video, NF Captain Matt Rocha was very involved with the Nuestra Familia for many years. Matt was very loyal to the federal faction and was part of the effort to take back control over the state faction when he was at Salinas Valley. Understand that Sammy Luna and Chuco Guillen intercepted Hot Wheelas meant for Matt, which put him under high suspicion. Matt then appealed to State NF General D.C. Cervantes. D.C. actually supported hitting fellow generals Conejo Perez and Chuco Guillen, but later changed his mind and ended up joining them when they convinced him how much money they could all make in the state. The state watched Mateo like a hawk, putting their plans into motion. Matt was then transferred out of Salinas Valley and hit on October 1st, 2019 at Pleasant Valley's B Yard. An NF ally, Duck Moran de Salas, was also housed down the yard when Matt was hit. They had earlier both been removed from the inner council without a vote and without due process. The state loyal faction squad, including the newly appointed regimental commander at the facility, Gordon Chino Douglas de Oakland, who had recently transferred in from High Desert State Prison, along with Mikhail Washington, led the attack on Matt on the basketball court. Another hit squad, including Joe Travieso Ramirez de Modesto, hit Duck at the same time. It is interesting that Travieso was said to have been made by Federal General Skip Villanueva, so one would assume he was loyal to the feds. When all this went down, Travieso apparently had a change of heart and switched teams and started attacking Chino on the state side. Mateo, Duck, and their supporters then initiated a counterattack until the yard was put down. Multiple casualties and weapons were found on both sides. A little more insight into this incident. NF Captain Sal Gangster Castro, who had been the regimental commander at Pleasant Valley earlier after Regimental Commander Turtle Robledo's departure to Solano in 2019, had been indicted by the feds in Operation Red Reaper in June of that year. According to charging documents, Gangster had been operating from inside his cell at Pleasant Valley using contraband phones to organize NF activities in prison and out on the streets, specifically in Kings and Tulare counties. He recruited gang members, encouraged them to commit robberies, and was engaged in the transportation of illegal drugs, both in and outside of the facility. He pled guilty on January 12, 2021, and was sentenced for a long prison term and placed at the ADX. His removal from Pleasant Valley already complicated matters. After the Matt and Duck hits, both the state and federal factions were locked up in ADSEG and continued to try to recruit and politic against each other. These power battles and developments have been covered by Renegade Media and other channels. As I stated in an earlier video, Matt had backed up the feds with guys like BJ Cabrera, who was hit at Salinas Valley State Prison. After these hits, Rocha, Moran, Cabrera, and a few others, feeling that they had lost their fight within the state system, decided to drop out. Meanwhile, George Puppet Franco de San Ho, longtime California state captain and one-time secretary to Chuco Guillen, was sent to DVI after the 2016 kickouts. He then landed at Pleasant Valley, but was swooped up in Operation Quiet Storm and is presently housed in Atwater. His release date from the BOP is slated for early 2035, when he'll be 70 years old. Mike Brody knows a lot about sensitive needs yards. I had one of Mike Brody's relatives in my Washington State Academy classes many years ago when I was a TAC officer and gangs instructor. Anyways, I also met Billy Adrosa, who was an IGI at Richard J. Donovan in San Diego. Like I said, I know lots of people. I hope I don't get in trouble for mentioning that, like it might put them in extreme danger, or others, just because they are or were employed in corrections. Sometimes people get upset when I mention that I know them, especially if I show their faces. Many have gone on video before, sometimes on my show, showing who they were. And any inmates that they've ever dealt with know who they are. So I'm not sure how I would be putting anybody or their families in danger. I don't know. I used to be part of the Folsom recruitment team, always going out into public unarmed. I was vice president of the Chicano Correctional Workers Association, Sacramento Folsom chapter, and we did many well-publicized community events. Again, I was not armed, and my wife was always there right along my side. I was also a recruiter at the King County Jail and president of the Seattle National Latino Peace Officers Association, always going out unarmed at dozens of public events. I just came back from speaking at the Mob Museum in Vegas, at a very well-publicized and well-attended community event. I wrote multiple books about prison gangs, but always kept my dealings with offenders on and off the job very respectful, so I'm not too worried. On this channel, I've never hid my face or disguised my voice. If bad guys really wanted to get me, they could, whether out in the streets or in the courtroom. But like the late great Joshua Mason, aka the Homie Hangout, I always do my research. And also like him, when I occasionally do get it wrong, I'm not afraid to admit it. I never intend to ever glorify the prison life or the gang lifestyle. I'm just trying to educate people. So hopefully you learned something from this video. That lifestyle is full of a lot of hype, many promises, but very few rewards. You can fall for it or just be your own man. It may be harder at first to stay in school, graduate, get a job, and bust your ass to provide for your family. But that's what a real man does. Or you could be hard, be down for your homies, go to jail and prison, and be betrayed by the very same people you sacrificed your life for. People who would kill you in a heartbeat if they had to, or just do it for greed and power. Face it, homeboy, you are expendable to them. So how you want to live your life is up to you. But don't get all upset when everything goes bad. You had your chances. You did have a choice, even if it wasn't an easy one. Now you have to live with the consequences. And with those words of advice, this has been Gabe Morales signing out for gangsters, cops, and politicians.